Welcome to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, courageously expanding love with me, Elizabeth Cunningham. Has the way that love has arisen in you seemed out of place or even taboo? My mission is to expand the conversation of love in the world. Is it possible to have deep, loving, healthy relationships? Have you ever been curious about having more than one relationship or partner at a time? Get ready to transform in love, be courageous, and set yourself free. In this show, we talk about relationships, sex, love, and the ways we wish we could be, but never thought were possible. I shed light on things that are not always talked about with conversations about expanding love. The Elizabeth Cunningham Show starts now. All right, welcome to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, courageously expanding in love. My name is Elizabeth Cunningham, and I am so excited for our show today. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we begin. If you want to tune in live to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, we air every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific time, and you can go to the Transformation Network Facebook page and watch live. You can also follow me on Instagram at ELZ Cunningham for more information about how to watch live. You can also catch us on YouTube or podcast format after the show airs. So if you miss the show, don't worry, you can still have access to the show at any time. So with that, we're going to hop into today's episode, and I am so excited. I'm so excited. Today we are talking to Peggy Olson. I have literally known Peggy since I was a small child and have grown up with her, and I lovingly call her one of my moms. And so I'm so proud and happy to have you on the show. I'm going to have you introduce yourself.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Elizabeth. That's so sweet. I need to talk through tears, but I can do it, and it's okay. I feel like this is probably a place where you can do that. Knowing you all of your life has been pure joy, pure joy. Put on my love earrings.
I love them.
Yeah, look at that. I know, right? So my name, Peggy Olson. I worked in reproductive health for 20 years plus at Planned Parenthood, and inhabit a female body. So I have dealt with issues relating to the legal system, the laws, how you can and cannot access care for your body, all of my life.
Yeah.
Oh, there.
No, thank you. Yeah, no, brilliant. I looked you up on LinkedIn before our show.
Wow.
And I know. I was
LinkedIn.
Like, on LinkedIn it says health educator at Planned Parenthood of the Heartland, and I know that you've been doing this work for 20 years, and that's what we're talking about on the show today, is really about reproductive health. And I talk about taboo subjects on my show around sex and relationships. And I find it really disheartening that reproductive health is a taboo subject, and yet here we are. It is a taboo subject, and there's a lot of fraught around reproductive health, especially with someone who has a female body. I kind of want to, I always like to start off my episodes really like laying down the baseline. Like if people really didn't know what we were talking about, what are we talking about here? So in your own words, what are reproductive rights?
And language is also very fraught, right? Because even that it has come to be known as reproductive rights is very, very crunchy stuff. First of all, just because it's called reproductive, it's like, it's not called body autonomy rights, right? That would be so much better. Body autonomy would be what I would like to just call it, because it's so broad.
Yeah. I would say, and why? Why would you rather call it bodily autonomy rights rather than reproductive rights?
Because, well, I live in Nebraska, and even in Nebraska, we did a sexual health conference, and we had to change the name to a reproductive health conference because we could not have sexual health in the name.
It's wild.
And the
It's wild.
idea that, lots of folks aren't going to reproduce. So I just don't like it called that.
It's not all encompassing. It doesn't actually paint the whole picture of what people deal with.
No, and it completely ignores any pleasure principle. It's like, these are your body parts, this is what you're supposed to do with them, kind of. It's very prescriptive. So I don't like that either. If I would recommend an organization called Sister Song, because they do reproductive justice. And I think that reproductive justice also, that is more encompassing. It makes more sense. It talks about being able to parent, if you want to parent, not choose to give birth, all of those things. It's a women and femmes organization, primarily women of color. And they have really, Loretta Ross is like, to me. And she really was the founding mother of that organization. And so.
Say it again, say the organization again.
Sister Song.
Sister Song.
Sister Song, yep, out of Atlanta. And so reproductive justice, I also like that because it is more encompassing, because it has to do with how you form your families, and a freedom to form your family how it best works for you, right? Whether or not there's reproduction involved.
Totally. Well, I mean, I call you, one of my moms, and you did not birth me.
Right? I love that. So oftentimes reproductive rights kind of has a very white women, often white women of means kind of a thing, reproductive rights, like when we talk about pro-choice, because often people aren't making choices. People aren't getting to make choices at all, even under that landscape of reproductive rights. But basic body autonomy, now I'm coming back to your question, I think.
I love all the caveats. No, all of the caveats are really important, and some of which I was going to actually bring up today. So this is perfect. Yeah.
Awesome. So it generally has to do, well, there was a bill in the Senate, the US Senate today, that did not pass. It passed the House, didn't pass the Senate, that was supposed to protect abortion rights. I think it was called the Women's Health Act or something like that. Okay. But even try to think of any other legislation that inserts so intimately between a healthcare provider and a person. Well, now we can, because we have all these anti-trans kids bills coming up across the nation. So they're right in with that. Like, this is what you can and cannot do to your body. This is what you can and cannot do. Puberty blockers for your child. These are choices that families should make with their healthcare provider. Right. Whether to give birth or not, forced childbearing is not cool. It is not cool. That just shouldn't be a thing, and it should be between somebody and their healthcare provider, not anyone else.
Yeah, and that gets into my next question, which is, why is this subject so important? Because I think that, with these terms, and this is what kind of happens on the show, is that we have these terms and we talk about them a lot, like reproductive rights, reproductive freedom, reproductive justice, sexual justice, bodily autonomy. Like, these are all terms that we hear so many times that I think that we start to disassociate from them, which is like, and we start to associate it with like specific people or specific groups or specific problems that like we don't have or that we're not associated with.
Yeah.
And so why is this subject matter so important? Like, why should people care about this?
because we all want to be free. Because we all want to be free. And it's generally, it also has to do with sex education. I'll add sex education in there. Yeah, and considering books that educate people on taking care of themselves and their bodies, you know, put that as pornography, you know, whereas it's not pornography, it's learning how to take care of yourself and your bodies, or teaching kids about their bodies. So I forgot your question kind of already. Why is this so important?
Why is this so important? Like, how does it actually impact our lives? You know, somebody's who like, oh, this doesn't impact me. Well, like, how does it impact our lives?
In every single way, all the time. You can take any tiny bit of it, if you even want to think about access to abortion care, we'll start there. Big taboo topic in general. But everybody loves somebody who's had an abortion. Everyone loves someone who's had an abortion. There are all kinds of societal impacts. So the guy who wrote Freakonomics, way before he wrote Freakonomics, he did this economic report about how legalizing abortion through Roe v. Wade made the fiscal impact it made on the nation, as well as the impact it had on crime rate, kind of societal things. We have a healthier, happier society when people get to choose whether and when to parent, and when people are supported in parenting, right? All of those things, we're better off economically, we're better off in terms of crime rates. It's crazy, like incarceration ties into everything, even if you don't take it as the individual person, like, what do I want to do with my life? Because otherwise, you know, biology is it for you, right? Biology is it for you. That's going to determine what you can and cannot do for the most part. Oftentimes, here's another term to bandy about, but reproductive coercion, when partners mess with pills, mess with birth control, don't let you get to your appointment, basically force a pregnancy, and then force childbearing on you as a way to maintain power and control, right, in a relationship. So from an intimate partner violence thing, it's huge because it traps people in with dangerous people.
Yeah, no, and I think that is, I mean, to say the full impact of, you know, healthcare, like this specifically, bodily autonomy, like it is your body, like you are in your body, no matter how you feel about that. You have to deal with the body that you have, no matter how you feel about that. And so to say that, and then to, you know, bring that all the way out, like you said, to the societal impact of that, because how we get to be as individuals does impact broader society, because how we act and how we be as individuals then broadens out to our community, then broadens out, it all impacts and influences one another. Well, we're going to go on our first break, and thank you so much for laying the foundation for us and like why we're talking about this and why this is so important. And when we get back from our break, I want to talk about more of the history too. You know, what was it like before, you know, Roe v. Wade, and like what was the impact that had on our nation and on what's possible, and like what is it like right now? So that's what we're going to talk about when we come back from our break. So strap on, and we will be right back. All right, welcome back to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding in Love. And man, this episode really does have a lot about courage. We are talking to Peggy Olson about reproductive rights, bodily autonomy, reproductive justice. And before the break, one of the things that we were talking about was,
what is it, what's the impact, what is the impact on people inside of this realm of bodily autonomy, reproductive rights. And the question that I want to ask is, we talk about Roe v. Wade, right? Like that's a huge thing. And first of all, I don't think that people fully know what Roe v. Wade is. And I don't think, I studied this in college. And so I have a whole history of how it was before Roe v. Wade. But for people who weren't there, who didn't live it, we don't have a concept of that. So that's what I'd really like to talk about. What was it like before Roe v. Wade? What was Roe v. Wade about, and what's now possible? And then, a little bit later, I'd like to kind of talk about where we're at currently as well. So I'm just going to throw all of that at you. So what was it like before Roe v. Wade? What was the atmosphere? Why was Roe v. Wade necessary?
Before Roe v. Wade, it was, well, abortion was not always illegal anywhere. I mean, I think even the Catholic Church didn't decide that they cared about abortion rights until 1860 or something like that. And there's an element to abortion that was done by midwives in homes. So we're talking in the US prior to any laws that outlaw abortion. And part of it kind of came from midwives were doing abortions at home, and and providing an array of services. And it was part of professionalizing doctors and deprofessionalizing women who worked in healthcare with other women. And then, time warp, then abortion is illegal. It goes state by state. So even pre-Roe, if you had money, I grew up in East Lincoln. Pre-Roe, if you had money, you went to Europe, you went to Canada, you went to New York City, for that shopping trip or, whatever, but actually you were going to get an abortion. Mm-hmm. There were also homes for unwed mothers. There was that where you go, you have a baby, they take the baby and then send you home like nothing. And you have to go back to your life in your little town in Nebraska or wherever, and act like nothing happened. There's just nothing whole health about doing any of those things.
Well, it's like the impact that has on people, and not to mention, because there's the socioeconomic aspect of this as well, where it's, the people who didn't have access to this, and like specifically women of color as well, where it's like, well, what do you do then when you can't, afford to go to, quote unquote, New York on a shopping trip,
right?
Or when you can't or aren't provided the space to, and just the fact that like you have, these houses where, you just have to have a baby, like literally have a baby, and then pretend that never happened, that you just have to go back to this life, and just like the mental and emotional, physical stress, trauma that mm-hmm. would happen from that. And then to add on to the fact that like, yeah, not everyone is a white woman who has access to this stuff too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course, anytime something is illegal, there are options that are unhealthy and unsafe. When I went to the Women's March in DC, a billion years ago, and they had this thing where you could write down your reason and attach it so that, why you were there. And I had this kind of all highfalutin thing about my, my position on say body autonomy, et cetera, et cetera. And I walk up, and the first thing that I read was a woman said, in 1950, whatever, she went to have an abortion. She paid the whomever they were $500 and got raped. That's why she was there at the march. And you just think about that one story repeated so many times over so many years, right? What a terrible, vulnerable place to put anyone in. And there were some underground networks. The Quakers ran an underground network to get people out of this country somewhere safe to have an abortion. There was, I think they were either Lutheran or Methodist ministers who had a way to do that. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Janes. For anybody who wants a little cool history thing, the Janes were women who learned how to perform abortions. And thanks to the Roe v. Wade decision coming down, they ended up not going to jail, but they learned how to provide abortions safely, and they made their own network. So, and ways to get a hold of it.
And did what? Say it again.
And ways to access abortion depending on where you were.
Got it. Yeah, so that's, and and as you mentioned, it's not just the women who are trying to seek these services, but it's also the providers or the people who are helping them who are putting themselves at risk, just so that people can have access to, as you stated, before, like just being able to decide what happens to your body.
I used to volunteer escort at Planned Parenthood here, and all the other escorts were like in their 80s. These folks were say
what an escort is.
So a clinic escort, there are protesters at clinics who yell as people come in. They'll try and block the driveway. We had one woman who would dress in scrubs, so she looked like a health professional, to stop cars. Sometimes the protesters would bring their little kids, and the little kids would be walking around in front of the driveway. And you have these people who are coming in looking for addresses, super stressed out. And it was horrible and terrifying. Anyway, so volunteers to help patients park their cars, make sure the protesters stay out of the private places. They could be on the sidewalk. They bought the house next door so they could scream at us over the fence. That would have bought a lot of diapers. I'm just saying, they bought a whole house. They could have bought a lot of diapers. And so it was, and they'd run video cameras. So clinic escorts would help somebody park, maybe put an umbrella up to walk them in, so that, depending on their comfort level. But the protesters can create quite a gauntlet for folks. And it can be hard to navigate. So the escorts just help people get inside safely.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, because
of course.
Just wanted to make sure that people knew what escort meant in this context.
In this context, yes. I wasn't part of some amazing folks in their 80s escort service, but I really like that thought about it. But I asked all of them their stories, and they, one couple who provided patients safe escorts into the clinic, they managed a hotel in Iowa. They had managed a hotel in Iowa. The doctor in that small town's wife was pregnant. Things went very badly with the pregnancy, and they needed abortion care. This guy is a doctor, MD, for this town. He can't provide anyone who will take care of his wife anywhere. So she continues with the pregnancy. She dies. He decided he could never let that happen to anyone ever again. So he started providing abortions on the super secret. And then the folks who came in to get an abortion, they would see him, and then they would stay at this hotel. So that is how this one couple came to the issue, because they provided the hotel room. And that was their kind of personal story. For that, another person came because they'd lost a loved one to an illegal, unsafe abortion. So some of us, because we just know the impact access to healthcare has, how important that's been for us. So there's all kinds of reasons. But the escorts were super powerful. One guy, a Unitarian minister, he did it because he had people, members of his congregation, come and say, we can't do this right now. Our family can't do this right now. So that was another way that people came to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So pre-Roe, it was terrible. And then Roe v. Wade, which was pretty amazing because Sarah Weddington, the attorney who handled that case, that was her first case out of law school.
I remember. Yeah.
Wow.
First case out a lot. Like, that's wild. That is wild.
Roe v. Wade. Yeah. There's a documentary about the woman too, who was the subject of the case matter. I've watched it, but anyway. And then after Roe, so after that decision, then every state, it was usually regular OBGYNs or other doctors just did it in their office, just provided abortion services in their office like they provided any other thing, you know, a PAP or whatever. And then the anti abortion movement started murdering doctors and blowing clinics up. And I mean, there was a doctor who, I think he was in New York State. He was shot through the window of his home while he was doing dishes with his daughter after coming home from his own father's funeral. It's like Tiller, I'm sure folks know, you know, Tiller, he got shot in his parking lot, and then he got shot in his church. A nurse was murdered there also. Yeah, and lots of bombs, lots and lots of bombs. I never worked in a building that didn't have bulletproof glass. You know, that was just a thing. And this was, of course, way before people thought about school shootings and just the very nature of gun violence anyway. But yeah.
But
so
it's like not even, I mean, and we do have to go on a break. So I'm gonna pause us here. But what I want to talk about is, you know, man, because this is a very heavy subject, and thank you for bringing it to light and having this conversation. And, you know, I want to get a little bit more into the details of really how this impacts different people and different groups of people. Because, you know, we're not, like we mentioned earlier, you know, it's not just, there's a difference between socioeconomic status, there's a difference between race, there's a difference in religion, you know, there's all sorts of factors that can come to play when we're talking about access to reproductive rights, access to reproductive healthcare, access to that bodily autonomy. So when we come back, we're gonna talk about, you know, more of like even the more details that this goes down and really impacts people. So we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding in Love. And we are here talking with Peggy Olson about reproductive rights, reproductive justice, bodily autonomy. And one of the things that we've been talking about so far is really what people have had to go through in order to even have the rights that we do now. And also that we're still, like, what we're going to be talking about now is like really what we're dealing with now as well. And one of the things that I mentioned before we went on break was, you know, when we talk about things like this, we have to also consider all of the intersectionality that comes with topics like this. So different socioeconomic status, different race, different religion, different abilities. And also, you know, different genders as well. And, you know, not that all female bodies are not all, you know, women presenting, right? Do not all identify as a woman. And so there's also that. So we could, and I was saying on the break to Peggy, you know, there's books and books and books and courses and resources and case studies, and, you know, the depths of this topic are just so deep. So really we are just scratching the surface. But my purpose here is really that people care. that people care about, not only your own bodily autonomy and what gets to happen to your body, but that you care about other people's bodily autonomy as well. And so, Peggy, my question to you is, what is it like now? What do we have to consider now, and how does all of these intersectionalities play into it?
Well, and I'm thinking as we close the last section and talking about all these brilliant and beautiful folks who were in their 80s who were escorting, all remember a time when it was absolutely illegal, taboo, filled with shame. And now here we are. They worked their whole lives to access contraception, which that was the whole thing too, getting
Right.
access to contraception.
And that's the other thing too, is that we've been talking about abortion, but like really bodily autonomy has to do with all of it. It has to do with contraception. It has to do with sexual education. It has to do with like just access to healthcare, like having a yearly, checkup and pap smear and all of that stuff. It's not just abortion is the hot topic, but like, that's not just it.
No. And generally you find a lot of folks who are working really hard to end access to abortion also are working very hard to end access to information. Stealing fantastic books from the library because they contain something like, oh, different kinds of families, right? Like, okay, when has love been so offensive? I can't think of any time in my life when love has been so offensive. So many opportunities to attack people who love each other or families that they make, or how they inhabit their own body. With all that, and the fear factor of bathrooms, how it manifests itself in bathrooms, all the transphobic stuff that happens. So the state of affairs as it is now, I think that Roe will be overturned. I think we've had our last anniversary of Roe. From now, we'll see.
Why do you feel that way?
Because I think that the Supreme Court will probably overturn Roe. Just looking at who's up there and what they think about and how the court's been making decisions. The ACLU, when you go to their website, you can track different cases as it goes through. But it's been, I'd say the last 15 years has been just one year after another consecutively worse. Yeah, absolutely. There's an organization called, I want to make sure I get it right, Frontera Fund. And this is just kind of how it is in Texas. Because now, if you have to travel very, very far, if you have kids or pets or other things that you have to do in your life, you have to figure out how to get your pets, kids, or I guess four-legged or two-legged kids, to and from the places they need to be fed, cared for, while you leave for a couple of days, stay in a hotel, have to pay a lot of money, unnecessary ultrasounds, that kind of thing. So it's outrageous how much money it can cost if you can even figure out how to do it. There's just really no concern for our healthcare when you put someone through that. Yeah. So
and we were even talking earlier about the coercion that can happen sometimes when you are when you become pregnant, or when you're trying to become pregnant, or when you don't want to be pregnant but your partner messes with your birth control or something like that. And that like some of the because it does, like as you said earlier, it does go state by state, and sometimes you have to have like your partner sign off on having like an abortion or having different types of procedures. And so if you are in a relationship where there is coercion or manipulation, that you also wouldn't be able to have access to that because your partner needs to sign off, and they're the one who is keeping you stuck in this situation, right? And so and even in, I think I'm it might be Kansas, but I might be totally misquoting this, but I'm pretty sure it's Kansas or Missouri, where, you know, like the stipulations that you have to have for different clinics are just like absolutely absurd, so that it's super, super easy for clinics to get shut down, because it's like, oh, well, you have to have your rooms be 64 degrees to 66 degrees. And if they're below or above, then it's unsafe for conditions. And so then we can, you know, shut your clinic down and stuff like that. So it's like the rules and regulations that people, you know, create or put up or that get passed can be absolutely absurd, not just for the people trying to access these services, but for the people who are providing these services as well.
Oh yeah, they're referred to as trap laws. And it can be like the width of a doorway has to get a gurney through it, but it's not a hospital. Or you have to have hospital admitting privileges, which depending on what kinds of hospitals you have around you, they won't give an abortion doctor hospital admitting privileges. But who's going to not take a patient if you need to send a patient to the hospital? I mean, if somebody needed to go to the hospital, they'd be like, no, not you. Right? I mean, that's just cruel.
Right.
And it's just made to be more difficult, another step that you have to go through.
Right.
You know, yeah. And now we're fighting telehealth again, and thinking about COVID and how many people, you know, things that people are doing online. We're having this conversation online. You can get telehealth for all kinds of stuff. And we've done telehealth for the medical abortions or medicinal, anyway, the pills. And so they're trying to shut that down. And it's always under the guise of women's health. Like there is no reason that a clinic needs to have, you know, 3-foot wide doors or doors wide enough for a gurney, I guess 4-foot wide, or hallways or all of that. It just costs a fortune to do. One time at our clinic, we carried our laundry down the stairs, dirty laundry down the stairs, and clean laundry back up the stairs, the same stairwell. And we were cited for that, and we had to get a different stairwell. I mean, it's in a bag, it's all of that. It's like at your average doctor's office, you know, the pillowcase, whatever. But yeah, we had to get a different staircase. And then the headline is, you know, shut down for, you know, blah blah laundry practices or something.
Right. Because then the headline can be like, yeah, it's unlawful practices, or like, you know, things like that, where it's just like, it's not the unlawful practice was that we didn't have a separate staircase for dirty laundry. That was it. Right. Yeah. But people don't look at that. People don't look at the, you know, the story of it. People look at the headlines. Right. And yeah, absolutely. And, you know, oh man, I meant to get more into like the intersectionality of it as well. But what was that? You sent me a resource, and I'm going to look it up to make sure that I say it right. So it's blackwomenradicals.com. Talking about
a reading list.
Yeah, the reading list. So reproductive justice, a reading list. And so everyone who is listening, watching this show, blackwomenradicals.com, and really looking at the different resources, accesses, different types of barriers that, you know, women of color face. And we didn't even get into religion or ability or different genders. And it's just, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. It's just like people who already, you know, like us, we're both white women, and you know, we're not millionaires, right, yet, but you know, but we have general access to healthcare, and we already have like this litany of stuff against us, and we're people of privilege, of like general privilege.
Absolutely.
And so just adding on those different layers of intersectionality and the lack of privilege that someone may have because of their race, because of their religion, because of their ability, because of their gender, you know, identity, you know, just adds on layers and layers and layers of already just absurd lack of access to these services. So when we come back from our break, just want to wrap up some closing thoughts. And I also want to talk about like, okay, like we've literally piled on like all of the stuff that we can't do, all of the barriers and all of that. And there is so much that is restricted and, you know, lack of access and just things that are barriers. But okay, great, there's a lot of barriers, but what can we do? So when we come back, you know, I really want to talk about, okay, there are all these barriers, let's be aware of the barriers, but what can we do? What is possible? What are steps that we can take? Because yes, there's a lot of barriers, but hey, we're not dead yet, and you know, there's work to do. So that's what we're going to talk about when we come back. Welcome back to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding in Love. We are talking to Peggy Olson about bodily autonomy, health education, reproductive justice. And really what we've talked about on the show is how in-depth and complex this issue is, not just in general, but for every single person individually with their individual circumstances, and really what's possible or really what's not possible for them, and where we're at now. And with everything that we've talked about on the show, you know, we've really talked about a lot of barriers to our health and our, you know, access to these services, not just abortion, but also, you know, pap smears and checkups, and, you know, just general education even. And so I really want to talk about what can we do? Like what are the things, what are the actions that we can take as individuals who want access to healthcare and education, and also want that for other people as well?
There's lots of layers of things that can be done. I know not everyone is interested in politics, but I can tell you that politics is very interested in every one of you, right? You've seen the keep bans off my body or keep your laws off my body. Well, they're all up there. They're all up in everywhere. So to check when bills are introduced, and you can also, if there's an organization you trust, like the ACLU or Planned Parenthood or Sister Song, and find out anything that they're highlighting, and you can check your local legislature. I already decided that next year, when the Nebraska legislature comes in, after they're done introducing all their bills, I want to have a party and everybody can do little activist things. Like, it's in Nebraska, it's easy to go online and oppose a bill. And it's a numbers game. It's a numbers game. You don't have to be all eloquent and all of that. You just go, I oppose. I don't think that the legislature should make this medical decision for me. Done, whatever it might be.
Right.
Or the school boards are big right now on pulling books and pulling curriculum. The whole anti-CRT thing has blown up. So find out locally what you can do at your city council, at your
School district, even.
School district, absolutely.
Yeah.
State board eds and your local school board, just to see what's up. And just make a statement, make a call, say tally one for I want, I don't want to ban books. I don't think we should be banning books. It can be that simple. So that also, I referenced earlier that maybe this was when you and I were talking, but there are 3 anti-abortion bills in the legislature here in Nebraska. And when I went in solidarity, but also testified, but there was a woman there had a cart, and it was just part of a mutual aid thing. And so she had this cart and she had tea in it. And so anybody who was there to testify or oppose the abortion bills could just have free access of, delightful things from her cart, some works of art, some little doodle zines, that's a thing you can do. Just, take care of yourselves and others. If you know people, be part of a mutual aid thing, that you can help somebody get somewhere or know what the laws are where you're at. And you don't have to do your own research. You can go to ACLU or Planned Parenthood or, and they probably have a whole legislative action thing that you can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And there's also being able to, and you can contribute with your dollars as well. I love the time, what is it? Time, treasure, or talent. Like those are great places to look when you want to contribute. You can contribute your time. You can volunteer for different organizations. It also takes time to, call up or, get online and, say yes or no that you do support or don't support things as well. So that's time, treasure, money, like speaking with your dollar, if that's, available for you to do. Supporting politicians or supporting people or supporting clinics, like, supporting Planned Parenthood, supporting the ACLU, sending people money so that they can have the resources to help people with this stuff. And then also talent, right? Like what talents, like that woman at the where were you at? Sorry, where were you at?
It was the Nebraska State Legislature, the day that they had the hearings for 3 abortion ban bills.
Yeah. And so, she contributed her talent, and helping people be there, right? And so really having different avenues and places that you can look, because you're never in a place where you can't do anything. Right? Like you are never stuck. There's no act that's too small. Because like you said, some of it is just a numbers game. Some of it is just being like going on the website and being like, no, I don't support this, or yes, I do support this, whatever that may be. And so just that simple act, you don't always have to be the person with the megaphone, you don't. You can be the person that just says, I don't support or I do support. Peggy, thank you so much for coming on my show today. We're going to wrap it up. If there's one thing that you would want people to get from this show, what would it be?
That this is hard. That you have to pay attention now. And it's because we haven't been paying attention. We thought that all of this was secure. And it actually has never been secure. And the idea that it was, that access to birth control, that access to, hormone care for gender alignment, that all of that we just had that and that was ours and it was private and we could do it. It isn't. And so that one should really do whatever they can. And it might just be, patting somebody on, on the back or rubbing their shoulder when they're writing this letter, right? When they're writing the letter.
Right.
But whatever it is you can do now would be the time to do it, because it's kind of an all-out assault on a lot of things.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Peggy. I love you. I love you so much.
Too.
I appreciate you. Thank you for being on my show today. And thank you for sharing just the wealth of knowledge that you have about this subject. And I appreciate you. Yeah.
Love each other.
Right. Yeah. Go out there and love each other.
Go out there and love each other.
Give a shit about each other. Care, love, give a shit. All right. Thank you so much for listening or watching to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show. We are live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific time. I would love to see you live, but if you need to catch a replay, you can do so on YouTube or on podcast form. Just Google the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding in Love, and you will find us. Thank you so much. Keep loving, my friends.
You have been listening to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding Love, with me, Elizabeth Cunningham. tune in live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on transformationtalkradio.com, where we shed light on relationships, sex, love, and the ways we wish we could be, but never thought were possible. Learn to love yourself and create the relationships you want. Connect with me at ElizabethAnnCunningham.com. That's ElizabethAnnCunningham.com.